So we have new patch notes, and they've now been out long enough that basically everyone's been able to digest it. But I know the burning question on everyone's mind the first time that they saw all these notes was, how will this impact Narmer builds? And honestly, it's going to be a massive change. And it's going to be for a couple different reasons, and we'll be exploring both on attack and defense, how this will ultimately affect Narmer and what it will look like. So first off, on attack, this is going to enable a build that I've been trying to get to work for quite a while, but it's just not quite there. And the missing ingredient is part of Ethan's kit, and this is going to be absolutely massive, and I will break down the reasoning why. So first off, I want to look at the team comp. We have a couple of needs that we're going to have to go through on the team comp. First requirement is we have Narmer. Simple enough. Next up, we're going to say we're making Ethan work. We're going to put him in there. And the reason why we do actually want him in there is because he has defense down and one buff. This is a build I've been trying to get to work for a while with Gabby. But the issue is you cannot do it with Gabby since she comes in with 0 buffs if you want to defense down. You can only get to 11 stacks of your passive by the time the turn will reach Narmer. And defense down, I cannot overstate how unbelievably massive it is going to be in the build. It is worth more than putting in 2 to 3 different characters. The reason for this is how defense ultimately works. It is a non-linear scaling on defense. And to show that, I have this wonderful graph right here. You have damage and you have defense. The more defense there is, the less damage you do. Everyone knows this. But the important part is that it's a parabolic curve. So since it's not linear, there is diminishing returns on too much defense, but there is massive gains on too little defense. From 500 defense to about 200 defense is a difference of about 10 to 15% damage, and that is a 200 defense drop. But that's because, as you can see at the top of this curve, when the defense is low, the slope of this graph just gets huge. And this can net up to 3.158 times bonus damage. Which, if you're able to somehow reach 3 times bonus damage, imagine having 3 Narmers all launching their nuke at the same time. Of course, that is going to be hilariously massive. So our goal is to, of course, get as low as possible. And Narmer, he's able to do a 40% reduction, which is really good, but that still leaves them at 60% total armor. So you're able to get pretty big hits, but not those super beefy ones that you want to be able to reach. But with defense ignore, you first drop them by 60%. Then you drop them by another 40%. How this works is it's not additive. It's not going to drop them down to 0%. You are removing 40% of the remaining 40%, which comes out to be an additional 16%. 16 times 4 is 40. So this gives us 76% defense ignore, which for the most part will bring Narmer into the range where he's shooting for just absolutely unbelievable. I will probably be able to reach over 100,000 with defense down. And this build was just never quite possible before now. So, another little tidbit. 1,250 defense is roughly where you hit 1 times damage. So that's going to be right in the middle of that curve. So that's just kind of your frame of reference that we're looking for. Most people are running around 2,000 defense. And if we're going to remove 3/4 of 2,000 defense, we get down to about 500, which is shooting at a magnitude of a little over 2x times damage. So we're essentially having 2 Narmers throw their nukes every single time. So back to looking at this team comp. Naturally, you have to have Narmer. Daylon will be taking the spot of Ethan, as he is not in this list just yet. So he gets his one chance to pretend like he's actually a real Esper. So this adds to our list. When we're looking at our buffs, at the start of Narmer's turn, you get 2. You get 1 from Light Above on him, and you get 1 from Adamantine. So we're at a base of 4. We need to reach 12. If we don't reach 12, we cannot do the double cast. So we have 8 remaining. Now we have Pan, who brings us 1 buff. That's going to bring us down to 7. Okay, so we have 7 buffs to fill. We have to look at this design up here. We have the option to either A, do double boost, or B, do Abigail boost. The perk of Abigail boost is that Narmer is able to build just purely DPS, completely ignoring speed in any way. As well as, if we're running double boost, we have Dahlia, who will be giving us crit buff. So there's definitely going to be some experimenting between these two on whether this is going to be double boost or single boost Abigail. Both have their merits. Ultimately, the single boost build, you're able to get in a little bit more damage, because your buff 2 or buff 3 slot can actually be either Ashley or YC. You would prefer Ashley at R2, just because she does bring that passive attack damage from her passive, which is able to be a sizable amount of their HP. On my current set, that's around 6,600 damage per hit on the AoEs. Things we have to look out for are going to be an overabundance of debuffs will push JYY. If we get 2, there's a decent chance she gets a turn. If you have 3 debuffs, she will get a turn. So ideally, you're trying to limit it to 1 debuff. In our case, we're trying to limit it to only be the Pan debuff for defense down. So when we're looking at that, we have to understand that Ashley and that YC both bring debuffs, so they can push, which is a major problem. Since then we're pushing up to 2 debuffs, that starts to become very dangerous. So initially we're going to be looking at the 2 boost build. So in order to do that, we'd have to pull these 2 characters in. Pull these 2 characters in, because both give us boost, and you see this in my triple cleave meta. Now, we have 1 slot left, and the problem we're looking at is that we have Clara, which then brings us down to 5 remaining, as she brings immunity and shield up. We have Dahlia, who brings us 2 more, in crit buff and attack buff. So we have to have 3 buffs. So this makes 1 Esper absolutely mandatory, the only one that can bring us 3 buffs. So we have to slot in Alice in order to be able to get to 0 here. So this is the critical number. We are now able to actually get this turn in. We have double boost, but all of it's going to be on Narmer. So Narmer has to hit hard enough that he will actually remove the entire team in one go. The dangers we're looking at in this current build is if they are running heavy Light Above, we do not have a way to strip Light Above before Pan would put down defense down. So, how we would normally want to offset this is instead bring in a DPS rather than the double boost strategy, and what we would be looking at is something closer to this. Forgot where I had Abigail inside all this. Okay, so we got those 2, then we need Abigail, we need Ashley, or we don't need Ashley. So that would only give us 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so this is the alternative to be able to get us up to that wonderful 12 count. But again, we're still not looking at enough damage. But where this becomes important is that we're able to set Narmer at just absolutely raw damage. We build Pan as DPS as possible, so that way he's at least able to get a little bit of something in. And then we just hope that our Narmer is hitting hard enough on everyone who does have defense down. Luckily, light above is not the absolutely most common run that people will run, since most people will be looking at either having a bit more crit, a bit more HP, or they'll be looking at most likely Avatara. Everybody loves Avatara. So hopefully this would be able to work against most situations in that case. So again, we'll be looking at 76% damage reduction on those it lands on. This should be able to one-shot basically anyone. What I'm very curious on is what the crit rate and attack, crit damage buff looks like on Pan. We'll be seeing those numbers on the PTR very soon. If they are large numbers, Narmer will just be absolutely exploding. Not even a crater left. It will just be obliteration, one attack, no DPS build. This will be kind of going back to my previous tank build in terms of design, which the highlight on that will also be that anything he does not one-shot, you're able to go to a second turn on this. And what would enable us to go into that second turn will ultimately be the fact that Pan has several debuffs that make life very hard. The survivors, when they use their S3 or S2, will end up having cooldown up against the remaining survivors, so they won't really be able to get a lot of damage in against you, so you'll just have absolute control over the fight, the ability to heal, and then eventually your armor just reloads and fires again. So now we need to look at this from a defense perspective. And a lot of people are saying that Pan is going to destroy the cleave meta, what little there was left. And I do not necessarily disagree. And the reasoning for that is going to ultimately be his R6. So outside of the whale meta, I believe that he will be serviceable. He will be a very good Esper. He's one of the best all-around Espers in the game. But the problem he will run into is that you can still just nuke through him. It's not a huge problem. But at R6, things start becoming very disgusting. Since the AP boost will affect the entire team, and they get 50% of the effect, the items that we're going to ultimately be looking out for is whether or not Abigail's S3, that gives a 100% boost, would then in fact give a 50% boost to the entire opposing team. Which, if the opposing tank team gets to 100% AP, how that area works is the Espers with the highest speed get reprioritized. It does not go in as whoever's first to 100% attacks. When you have 9 Espers at 100% AP, it just comes purely down to what's their speed on their character sheet. And that's who will go next. And that goes the same for when Ashley is cutting people's turns. And 9 times out of 10, if you're running slow Narmer, that means he's going last. They're able to get up full buffs. Your odds of one-shotting are slim to none. So he will probably be absolutely broken at the high end of the whale meta. I do not see a great way to get through him unless you do a completely boostless build. But the issue with doing a boostless build is that you don't have a boost. How are you supposed to get all your characters to go before the opposing characters do? Because you need your Narmer to ultimately nuke before they can get any buffs up. So basically that's going to be a large problem. But I don't think it's going to be too different than the R6 Sally meta. The whale count is much smaller than people imagine at Point War 18. There are maybe only 20 to 30 very competitive whales that are up there that will probably have R6 Ethan on drop. So it'll just be the same as seeing an R6 Sally, where, you know, it's not a fight you're going to be able to do. You just leave that fight immediately. So going back over to the build, I still think that this will be the way to go about it. And if it does work as I intend, I should be able to break 6 digits on a single strike in PvP. And I'm really hoping I can bring you guys that video just to show you just how hard this will hit. So, I am hyped on Pan. I'm terrified of Pan. it is very conflicting emotions. I hope that you all are able to enjoy him as well. And feel free to let me know what you think about Pan and whether or not there's any interactions that you believe should be investigated prior to his launch or even during his launch. I will be instantly getting him at R2 because that then starts him off with the buff, which will be required. So I will be testing him as much as possible. So again, feel free to let me know on if there's anything you wanted to see done. I hope you all have a fantastic day.